Civil War coming to an end here. I can list the events of the Civil War. We're not going into great detail. This is not going to be comprehensive. There's tons of comprehensive, supplemental Civil War information online in thousands, millions of books. For this video, we're mainly going to express the ideas that you need to know for your AP US History exam. Not handing out a lot of red pills today, really just giving you the facts so you can have an honest conversation about the Civil War with other students or other human beings, but also so you know the basic facts that could appear on your exam. Fort Sumter, let's start this thing out. Charleston, South Carolina, April of 1861. The South secedes. Now, everyone living in the South, fine, whatever. We're a new country. Get it. Cool. Good deal. Not really that big of a deal. But the problem is there are military bases in the South. And so it's fine that the people of the South like, oh, we're a new country, cool. But the military base and the Army are still U.S. Army. They're still part of the U.S. military. And just because the governor and politicians in the state said, well, we're leaving, the military cannot abandon Abraham Lincoln. They cannot abandon the nation. They cannot quit. That's not the way that it works. But the South's like, look, this base, Fort Sumter, is in our state. We're a new country, so this base is ours. We need you to leave. Obviously, the Union's not going to, A, just do what they say, or B, give up a strategic location, considering that, hey, war looks inevitable at this point. We probably don't want to concede this strategic military base. Oh, you don't want to give it up? All right, well, we are going to make you. You are surrounded by us. So the attack on, or the bombardment of Fort Sumter will begin. And so we went from seceding, starting a new nation, to the refusal to allow that to happen, into a military conflict, and now we are in the Civil War. The Norse plan will be called the Anaconda Plan by Winfield Scott, and the first plan is going to be a blockade, so keep goods out of the South. A blockade, we put these ships up, and so we won't let goods and supplies come in from Europe to help out the South. We will also prevent the South from shipping their goods out and making money, using that money to buy more goods. So we're going to try to starve them out. This is very common. We will use a similar pattern in World War II with Japan. We'll have an oil blockade. Economic sanctions are popular today. Two ways to solve, well, this is a broad generalization, but for the most part, there are two ways to solve a conflict between separate nations, which this is. This is the North, or the United States, versus the Confederate States of America. And so how do you solve a problem? How do you reach a resolution between these two nations? One is going to be war, and that's similar to today. When two nations have a problem, they can go to war. Two is diplomacy. They work it out. Now, blockades are an act of war. This isn't not necessarily violence, but it is an act of war, but it's not a severe act of war. So we've got acts of war, we've got diplomacy. Now, on the side of acts of war, you have stuff that's not very severe to, dropping nuclear bombs on people, gassing people. So on that spectrum, we are talking about light warfare, light aggressive tactics, and those light aggressive tactics are used to suggest or convince or persuade your opponent or your conflicting nation to choose diplomacy so you can work things out. Keep the goods out of the South. Second part of his plan, divide the South along the Mississippi. This is not going to be diplomacy. This is going to require military efforts. This is going to require violence. And through acts of war, we will take these locations, or the North will take these locations along the Mississippi River and then divide the Confederacy into two smaller armies. Two smaller armies, less soldiers, less resources, easier for the North to conquer. So they have to come down and divide along the Mississippi River. So they'll need to do the blockades and then divide the Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana from the rest of the South. Third part of the Anaconda Plan now is to take the capital, invade the South, take the capital, take out the leaders, force negotiation, force them to quit. Very common in past wars. If you can do this, that's how you can solve it. And it still can work today. If you take out the capital of your opponent, you take out their leaders, you take out their strategic commands, you can force them to the peace talks table or to diplomacy. Typically, we don't talk about military strategy in this course in AP US History, American I or American History II. Very rarely. American Revolution, we might go into some strategy just to give you an idea, but it's not going to show up on the test. The War of 1812, we didn't do it. Mexican-American War, we didn't do it. Battles with the American Indians, we didn't do it. World War I, we won't do it. Spanish-American War, not going to talk about strategy. World War II, we will go into it, but that's just because of exceptionalism and a glorification of America's triumph against totalitarian leaders. So we will go over to the strategy just to talk about how awesome we are. Vietnam, they might talk about it on the APUS history guidelines, but that's not necessarily to talk about really actual strategy. That's more of a bigger picture to make America look bad. So those are pretty much it. Those are really the only 3 times that we will talk about actual military strategies. The Civil War, the Anaconda Plan and the Civil War, World War II to make America look great, and then Vietnam to really spit in the eye of America. So that's it. Try to remember some of these strategies. The war will start with the First Battle of Bull Run. When we talk about these war or battles, they will often have 2 names, the name that was used by the Union to describe the battle and then the name that was used by the South to describe the battle. I'm just using the most popular name. I'm not really picking North or South. Fun fact that could pop up. You might not be quizzed on your exam about this fun fact, but you might be quizzed on the general theme here, and that's that people actually went to the First Battle of Bull Run. They crossed over into Virginia to watch. They picnicked to watch the battle between the North and these Rebs in the South. And they were surprised to see that, wait a second, the South won, the North lost. Now, the picnic idea is not necessarily the fact that you need to know, but it's part of a bigger theme, and that theme is the North was unprepared from this war on every single level. The people were naive. The citizens had no idea really what to expect, and it had been a long time since they experienced a war. War of 1812, the American Revolution. The Mexican-American War was out of sight, out of mind. The people in the northern states, the people in the southern states, we'll say mainly the northern states, were separated from what happened in the next American War, which was actually a pretty easy win for America, but out of sight, out of mind. They didn't have to experience the battlefield like they saw in the American Revolution. They didn't have to experience the wars up front like they might have in the War of 1812. So they were soft. They were naive to what was going on. They thought this was no big deal. The military didn't think it was a big deal. The government, the politics didn't think it was a big deal. Easy win. But guess what? This country that started a day ago, they just won the battle because they have a different approach. They have a different belief. They have a different mindset. They weren't soft. They weren't naive. They knew what they were going into. They had a different reason for fighting. And so this picnic thing, although it may not be the fact that shows up, it gives you the general idea of on day one of this war, where's the North? On day one, what's the mindset of the South? And it'll help you understand why the North or why the Union nearly loses this thing because they're not prepared. They do not know what they're going into. They don't understand the general turmoil of the country. And they're not really all that worried about it. We're often created this idea of North versus South, slavery's wrong. This side hated slavery, that side loved slavery. That's just not true. That is just a gross overgeneralization. Most of the people in the North really weren't all into this thing so much, but because the war has broken out, they got to go to war. And when you got to go to war, you don't really go to war with the best approach. So 3,000 Union soldiers go down, 1,750 Confederate soldiers go down. Remember that number because we're just going to make those numbers worse and worse and worse. And remember, these guys are Americans. These guys are also Americans. Second Battle of Bull Run, South wins again. These pictures aren't really doing it for me, so let's go with this one. No, that's not actual Civil War footage. That's Lord of the Rings. But, hey, it gives you an idea of battle. We need something to jazz it up, make it exciting. So, hey, South's got 2 wins, North not doing so. A Battle of Antietam, bloodiest day of the war. Not the bloodiest battle, but the bloodiest day of the war. 23,000 die or wounded. So, yeah, we increased that number as 3,000 at the First Battle of Bull Run, where the Americans or the Union took a hit or the North took a hit. 23,000. This thing got out of hand quickly. Lee will retreat, but General McClellan from the north of the Union does not follow him. He could have followed Lee, taken him out. He could have taken the capital of Richmond. In theory, he could have. He didn't think he could. He hesitates, and he will be fired by Lincoln in probably one of the nicest firing letters ever. Malcolm Gladwell writes about this in his book about conversations, I believe. But anyway, McClellan hesitates. Maybe possibly they could have ended the war right there if McClellan acts, takes Richmond, or follows Lee, but he doesn't. Now, the good news is for the North that because the South loses, Europe says, yeah, we're not going to get involved in this. We thought about joining the South. We thought about helping out the South. And now the South's not doing so well. We're just going to stay home. Fairweather fans, if I've ever heard of them. Pictures. We do have pictures from these actual battles, but the way that the pictures work take a long time for a picture to develop, so you got to sit still for a long time. It takes a while. And we find out that the guy that did a lot of these pictures, Matt Brady, I think it is, they moved bodies to stage the photos so they were in the right place. They look good. They had people actually pretend to be dead for some of these photos. Not cool. Whatever. I don't know. You're not supposed to do that today, even though, and that's pretty much been our American press has said, look, you can't fake these photos. You have to take real, true, authentic photos. You don't stage things. You don't encourage people who are dying, who are wounded to do certain things. We don't want to manipulate. We're not trying to create propaganda. That has generally been a line that the American press has followed. Now, obviously, they broke it at the very beginning. But this is they were still considering this art. It wasn't really a matter of being a part of the press. He was more of an artist, is what he would claim, and that's what's been written. And that's fine. But in the years to follow, where we actually have a press and photojournalism, for the most part, America has followed this idea that, here's your red pill, that we're not going to manipulate photos. We're not going to choose the way that we shoot. We're not going to choose the way that we edit film. We're just going to give people the real story, just present the facts. We're not telling a narrative. That kind of changed in Syria. You can look up the photojournalism that came out of Syria and the war there and the photos that were released and what the American press decided to do. Mainly, the red pill belief is that the media was, and this was kind of what was happening here. You know, you're showing this to bring the war home and show people really what's going on and motivate people. The press may have, with the Syria photos, been trying to pressure America into starting another war in the Middle East. Just one belief with some of the photos that they chose to release. Or not. Maybe they were being completely honest. And look, this is just the way that it is. A lot of the footage says that it wasn't. All right, Ambrose Burnside. You know you're not a really good general when the only reason we remember you is because of, what do you think this guy's popular? That's right. He invented Sideburns. That's where we get the name Sideburns. Joe Hooker, you're probably not a good general if the reason we remember you is because the name of prostitutes as hookers is because of you, because of your undisciplined soldiers, because your encampments were parties and wild with out of control, you know whats, and we name them after you. Yeah, that's, I think it's, man, where did I get these guys? That's the reason why the Union's losing. The generals, as we mentioned in previous videos, the better generals were in the South. You got the Sideburns dude. You got the prostitute dude. You got the guy that decides, like, I don't want to win, doesn't follow Lee. Yeah, not good. How about some ironclad ships? We actually have a battle. Naval warfare is no longer wooden boats. It is steel boats. You can't have a steel boat. Steel doesn't float. Wood floats. That's why we make boats out of wood. Yeah, but it's not really about the wood. It's about buoyancy. And so you can make steel float. And so we have the Battle of the Merrimack from the south and the Monitor from the north. You're probably saying, what are those? That's the way the ironclad boats look. This is where give them a break. These were the first steel ironclad bodied ships they ever made. So yeah, they look a little funky. They look a little different. It's a draw. No one wins, but I get it. They look weird. The Battle of Shiloh out west, April 1862. The U.S. finally winning, and we're going to be able to divide the Mississippi, the bloodiest engagement of the Civil War. Wait, wasn't that other one? That was the bloodiest day. This is the bloodiest engagement. They're like wrestling pay-per-view names. We got fancy names for every one of these battles. We shouldn't joke around because twice as many casualties as the previous battles combined. So take every battle before Shiloh, so all the battles in 1861 and up to April 1862, add all of them up on your calculator, and it's less than how many died or hurt, casualties, not necessarily died. 13,000 for the U.S. If you remember the Battle of Bull Run, the first one, 3,000 U.S., 1,750 Confederacy. So basically 10 times for Confederacy. Not quite 10 times, but a lot. We're now into 5 digits. 24,000 American casualties. And it will only get worse. This is barely even a year, folks. April 1861 was Fort Sumter. 1 year later, and the bodies are really hitting the floor at this point. I see in video too.